I thought at the very beginning we need to talk a little bit more about what is this thing innovation anyway. You know, lots of words in our language get used so much they no longer carry powerful meaning because they just slide by us, they glide by us, and we assume we understand them and everyone else does too. Well, a distinction that we're going to make in order to define and explain innovation is one that Phil Schlechte has helped us make. And other people make it too, in slightly different ways. He distinguishes invention from innovation. Invention might be a wonderful idea that someone has, and it can be a solo, a single person doing this, or it could be a group. But innovation is the taking of that idea, and as we would say in education, implementing it. But actually, often it's the words that come with it are installing, making it happen. If you're in the business world, they would say taking it to market is innovation. So I want to have you look at a couple of examples right now that we've come across as we think about this. I don't know if you know this, but Corning Glass invented Gorilla Glass that's on the, used in all of our iPhones way back in 1962. And it sat on the shelf. It wasn't taken to market. It wasn't installed in any product or process that was used until Steve Jobs came along, and he was unhappy with the iPhones that he was testing because the covers on them were scratching. The plastic was unacceptable. And somehow he came across the Gorilla Glass that had been sitting on the shelf and said, this is it. And if you have interest and you want to go do a little more reading about it, since 2008, Corningware has had millions and millions of applications and dollars with Gorilla Glass being used. So I think it's a great example to think about the difference between invention and the installation of an invention in use. So taking it and using it in some way. Another one I just came across lately, and I got interested when I saw it in an article because the inventor and the innovator is from Minnesota, and that's where I spent a lot of my grown-up years. And he created something he calls mobile legs. He had to be on crutches for a while. How many of you have ever had to be on crutches? Okay, I never have, but the men in my house have a tendency to do things where they end up on crutches. And they're unhappy with them, and I hear other people are unhappy. And so was the creator, Jeff Weber. So he designed a very different kind of rest, and here you get a little bit better idea here. And his company, Mobile Legs, has been producing them, selling them, and recently he got a national award from Entrepreneur magazine for one of the best designs of the year. So he is not only an inventor, but an innovator. He came up with an idea, and he installed it, he took it to market. He made a product with it. As you think about inventions and innovations, they don't have to be things, they don't have to be products. They could be processes as well as products. I had a chance to have lunch with an old friend I hadn't seen for a while. And we were English teachers in the same district back in the 1970s and 80s, before some of you were, even thinking about teaching or maybe even born. But she was an amazingly creative teacher. And early on, she wrote a grant, and I think it was IBM, but I can't remember which company, and got like 35 computers. And she had this idea that she ran with. And she worked her principal, and she worked other folks, and she set up, for what that time was very unusual, was a writing lab. And she did something else that was quite unusual. She worked with a group of young people who would become peer tutors in that writing lab. and they learned the technology, but they also got some basic understandings and developed their skills in working with their other high school students with their writing, and raising good questions and helping them think about their writing. And I was thinking about that in terms of this opening presentation tonight, because as wonderful as Rita's idea was, as well as it stuck and got implemented in that school and lasted, and they got new computers over time and so on, I'm going to say to you, and you have some of these slides in your material, that it ended up being a sustaining innovation rather than a disruptive innovation. And if you look with me at those definitions, we can think together about why. Her notion of a writing lab made a great deal of difference to students in that high school and to a couple teachers. She was the writing lab person, and to particularly to those peer tutors, but it didn't require much change on the part of the school as a whole. Iroquois High School kept trucking along as it had for decades. And so that particular innovation got stuck in there, and the rest of the school really wasn't affected. That's what we mean by sustaining innovations. They're not bad. They can be quite useful. But they do not require that rules about how we operate here, roles, what it means to be a student. Well, she touched that, but with a small group of students. Relationships change that much, nor the values, beliefs, or commitments, because it was not a school-wide change in how you do the work that affects kids. In contrast, disruptive innovations are those that are incompatible with the existing system. They require deliberate, intentional work on the part of leaders to make changes in roles, in rules, in relationship between those roles, and in articulating and building commitments to beliefs and values in that organization. And that's the long, hard work. And that's why, that's really the second reason that I'll call out to us today and say the kinds of schools, almost everyone in the room I think knows us, the Schlechty Centers work pretty well, that we're committed to thinking and supporting leaders like yourself and thinking quite differently about how schools work for kids. And that requires leaders who are willing to have the courage to lead disruptive as well as sustaining innovation, and to recognize the difference between the two. We're not saying one's good and one's bad, but we're saying it's extremely important that leaders like yourself know when it's required that the culture and the structure be changed, and when a change can go with the existing order. I'll give you another example, and a personal one. I was a writing project teacher. Any of you in here writing project experience the writing project experience? Well, in any case, it changed my world as a teacher. It changed how I thought about teaching high school kids writing, and I thought I was pretty nifty before I did this. It was 4.5 weeks in the summer. It was hard work. I worked with, I was part of a group of elementary, middle, and high school teachers, and it did change what happened in my classroom. But it did not touch the life of Manual High School, 2,200 kid high school at that time. My principal thought it was great. I was doing whatever I was doing, okay? It was not really a part of his world and what was going on in that school. So it was a sustaining innovation, not unimportant for the kids who came through my classroom, but not a disruptive innovation. I give another one, kind of moving into the world of technology. And we can think record stores. Well, some of us can. Some of you don't even know what we're talking about. And you'd go to the bins and you'd look through. And some of us remember 78's records. And then we had, and I'm not exactly sure of the order, maybe 45's. And then there were stereo records. And so you went from record players to these nifty stereos. Okay? Those changes were sustaining. They were sustaining. The industry was improving and making changes that would bring music to us in new and improved ways. However, the disruption that we know about in the industry came with music file sharing, okay, and iTunes. And think about how the world of retail music has been turned on its head. That's a disruptive innovation. As is, I think I got my verb right, the cell phone. Okay. And sometime in April, I read this article which said that communications companies were probably not going to be required to offer service, landline service, in all areas as they once were, because the cell phone has changed all that. That's disrupted the whole system, the way it works. So keeping that in mind, the other reason that we think this topic of innovation is so important for a group of leaders like yourself is because as you commit and continue to grow your schools and districts as organizations that are focused on engagement and committed to that and using the Working on the Work framework, that is a disruptive innovation. We can treat it other than that. We can treat it as a sustaining innovation, but we're not really making it live as it is intended. Because unless the way we view kids, their roles are distinctly changed, then as adults, the reason we might be concerned about designing engaging work doesn't exist. And you could go through all the roles in that way, and the values and the commitments. So the three reasons are, as leaders, you work with others, you lead, support, nurture them, you plant acorns for the future. The second reason innovation matters is that what you're about is making schools work for kids. And you're facing demands to create things that don't exist now. So innovation is absolutely necessary. And then very specifically, the Working on the Work framework is, if you look at it with the integrity that it was designed with, it's a disruptive innovation. So, one more other place I'm going. When we talk with audiences about innovations that are sustaining and disruptive, sometimes folks think of that as being disruptive to the people. Well, it may be, but we're talking about organizations. And to help you think that through, I want you just to follow with me in a couple slides here. Just look at it, think about what you see, what it makes you think of, and why someone might choose that photo to go along with the word sustaining. Okay. And then in contrast, also water, okay? Think about what this picture looks like and the disruption of a tsunami of high winds and all that might come with that if you're paddleboarding or boating or whatever. And so it's only natural that when we think about sustaining and disruptive, we think about certain words that go with it. We think about sustaining as good, it's nourishing, it's maintaining, it's sustaining. And disruptive, characterized by unrest, unpleasantness, and disorder. However, and this is what we have to come back to, we're not suggesting that disruptive innovation is bad and sustaining innovation is good, or even the other way around. What we're suggesting is that the disruption or the sustaining is applied to the organization. Human beings in those organizations might experience, pleasantness or maintaining or disruption. But what we're talking about is what happens to the organization. What happens to the schoolhouse when a disruptive innovation is installed? And then what do leaders need to do who think well about it to help folks, understand the nature of the change and to give them the supports they need? So it's all about the people, but we're not using sustaining or disruptive to apply to just the human response. It's applied to the organization.